Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Jeannie. I am a 6'2" self-projected projector. I have a defined head, ajna, throat, and G center, and they're all connected straight down the middle channels, which are all part of individual circuitry. Today, I want to talk about this thing that's said a lot in the human design community. And it's a sentence, it's a piece of information that usually sounds like projectors are not here to work. And I recently had a conversation with someone who kind of like didn't really understand what that meant. They're trying to like wrap their head around this piece of like projectors aren't here to work, and they were kind of like starting to question whether or not what they were doing for work was correct for them or not. So I wanted to do this video to kind of like offer a slightly different perspective from what I feel is normally said, because like many projectors do work, like even within the coaching community, like they're coaches or guides or whatever title they feel like resonates more for them, but they still do work. So the way that I kind of like reframe this for myself is that projectors are not here to work like the majority of the population. And here's where we kind of have to take a look at like, what does work mean to us? Like, what does that look like? In the media, in movies, TV shows, music, kind of like the idea, the picture of work that we're given is, 9 to 5, working overtime, working Monday through Friday, sometimes even weekends. I come from a very traditional Mexican household. Overtime is usually always a thing. Part-time jobs. I remember my dad had like a full-time job and a part-time job or two. The thing like we have to remember is that the majority of the population is composed of generators and mani-jeds, right? So projectors make about 20% of the population. And another thing I would encourage us to remember is that projectors are the type where there's such a huge variety. There's such a huge variety of projectors. There's some projectors that are classified as energy projectors because they have motors defined. And motors are the solar plexus, the ego center, the root center. I think that's all of them, right? It's the sacral, but no projector has the sacral defined. So if you've been struggling with like this concept of like projectors aren't here to work and what that means, that's kind of like what I want to talk about, because I've kind of been thinking about what work for me has looked like through the trajectory of my life so far. And I want to say that I was very blessed that I had a family that was always very supportive of my of my energetic levels. It was kind of like very known and accepted that I didn't have a high energetic output even as a child. Like I wouldn't join the other children in playing hide and seek or tag, or if I did, I would tap out very quickly. Most of the time, like I like to watch, I like to observe. For me, fun and play was reading books, coloring, drawing, playing with Barbies, like very low physical output type of things. And then I as I got older, I was never really required to get a job. My focus was school. Again, coming from a Mexican family of immigrants, dad was always very big on like me focusing on my education. That way I didn't have to work as hard as he did. So I never worked a job while I was in college. I had little odd jobs here and there, like babysitting or notarizing things. There was a while where I cleaned houses, but I always like teamed up with somebody else, and it didn't feel like a lot of work. I like that I could make what dad made, like compared, because that's the frame of reference I had, what dad made in like 8 to 12 hours of work, I could make in 2 or 3. And it gave me freedom to do other things as well. So I was always kind of like used to working on my own, and that was normal for me. I always knew intuitively that working a 9 to 5 was not going to be ideal for me. And there was one time, I don't remember if I was still in college or I had just gotten out of college, or maybe it was out of high school. I really don't remember when this was, but I tried my dad got me like an office job where he was working at that time, and I was literally there for a day, and I realized this isn't for me. And like the only thing they had me do that day was dad worked at this warehouse where they sold like pastry shells and fillings and things like that. It was owned by a guy who was from France, so he imported a lot of these stuff. Think like little tarts, like French tarts, that type of thing. And the first day, my only day, my job was to look through the catalog and get familiar with the product. But I was kind of like flipping through the book trying to memorize things, but it felt like a waste of time because I didn't understand how I was going to be using the information. Like I knew like the why, get familiar with the product, but I kind of needed a little bit more of like, what am I actually going to be doing? Like, what's my role? And I just knew it was not for me. So I ended up not even going back. I didn't even put a notice or anything. And when I got the paycheck, I was like, this is highly offensive. I really did consider not even cashing in the check because it felt like it wasn't even worth the money doing that. So that experience kind of like really confirmed for me that working a 9 to 5 was not a thing for me. When I was in college, I feel like that's where I was a little bit more like on the go because I didn't live on campus. It was about an hour's drive away. So after the first semester, once I kind of like got the hang for how it worked, I scheduled my classes either 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and then I would be there from like 8 to 5. But then again, back then I was a bit younger. I didn't feel it as much. But I think like after I finished college, I did start to feel the burnout. But I also had like the summers to kind of recover. I didn't have to get a job. So that kind of maybe allowed me to be able to recover and maybe not feel the burnout as much. But that's kind of like the only time in my life where I felt like I've been more like go, 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 one thing after another, like one class after another, always, on the go, moving from one place to another. And after that, when I graduated from college, I started my own business. I started reselling online. I could find items that I could flip and make a pretty good profit. I didn't have to work a lot. I think a lot of my friends would always get triggered because I would joke that I would, like, every day for me felt like a Friday. And I would always describe like, oh, I think I only worked like half of a part-time job and I made pretty good money, like enough to be able to cover my expenses and whatever it is that I wanted or needed. I didn't have to pay rent. I would focus like on my expenses, cell phone, car insurance, my car payment, but I wasn't really required to do anything else out of my own, very voluntarily. Like I would pitch in for food or like for bills or things like that, but it was never really required. So that's kind of like what work has been like for me. So I don't really have a negative connotation towards work because it just like never really applied to me. Like I always kind of like had my own schedule. I could work when I wanted. I could sleep in as much as I wanted to. I could stay up late if I wanted to. I had a lot of time freedom. So it's kind of like taking a look at what your relationship to work is. I know that a lot of projectors have been, or like before they knew that they were projectors, they did work 9 to 5 and they did experience, a lot of burnout. Again, I was always very blessed and very fortunate. And in a way, this can kind of like be of service now because I'm like, okay, let me share with y'all like how I see work, and maybe this will help y'all reframe the reference that you have, in connection to work. And here's the thing, like I say this very often, the same words can have different meanings to different people. There are people who really love to work, they like what they do, and then there are people that are not excited about going to work. So because like once you start realizing that you can have more of a say as to what you get to experience, this is where you can like start getting really creative and coming up with work or creating these avenues of income that are more suited to your energetic levels. Now, when I mentioned that there are different types of projectors, there are some projectors that have a lot of energy. I'm a self-projected projector. I have no motors defined. Mental projectors are also kind of like the self-projected and mental projectors. Splenic projectors might be the ones that struggle a little bit more with consistent energy. And that's not like a rule. Like It just depends on your conditioning and how long you've kind of like been trying to keep up with everyone else. There's several factors, but just to kind of like really simplify it. Because like, for example, if you're a projector and you only have like the root center and there's this one specific channel, which I can't think of at the moment what it is, that's connected to the splenic center. There's one that, I think it's the one closest to like the inside of the body graph, that if when people that have that channel, it's like they can't stay still. They need movement. So even though they're projectors and they might only have these two centers defined, they might be a projector that really does get a lot done, has a lot of energy because of how this particular channel works, where like they need to move. That's healthy for them. So it's about really like tapping in to yourself, getting to know yourself, and tuning into like what is it that your body's telling you. I know that like after a while, like I cleaned houses for a very long time, and it came a point where my body was in so much pain. Like I would get home, or like even way before, like I most of the houses that I cleaned had 3 stories, and they were very like organized people. The houses, like you walked in and you're like, this house seems clean. Like it doesn't really seem like it needs a deep cleaning because they kept the house very clean. It was a weekly thing. I was always very picky about the people I worked with. I worked with people that was a weekly thing because it was easier to keep the house clean. If it was every 2 week, a 2 week type of deal, I would charge more because we would skip a week in between. But these were really houses that looked clean. I was just there to kind of maintain that level of cleanliness. But there came a point where my body just wouldn't, it wouldn't respond the way that it had been for years, and I could understand why. And after a while, I realized I've got to let this go because physically I can't do this anymore. And it's kind of been like this progression of slowly letting go of certain things that my body's like, okay, that's no longer in alignment for us. And it's been learning to trust that I am stepping into a type of work that's more in alignment with what my body needs and things like that. So I think like once we start tuning into our bodies, that can give us some clues as to what needs to shift or what is asking to shift, and then we can kind of like, you know, make the changes. But going back to this thing, the saying that projectors aren't here to work, it's about reframing. Like if you, because like I've been thinking, I like to work. Like I do like what I like. I'm still reselling. I am starting this new business with human design coaching and that type of what's the word? I can't think of the word, but like let's say with coaching or guiding, you know, using more of like my projector gifts in order to guide people, because like what I do right now, I'm not really, there's no guidance, and not that to say that you have to guide people. It's just like feel into it. And this is kind of like where I really like to encourage people to like tap into like, what do you want to do? Like, what would excite you? Like, what would you be like, something that you can't believe that you get paid for to do for work. It doesn't feel like work. It feels more like play. And so it's kind of like getting clear of like what your definition is of work, tuning into your body and seeing if it needs to be tweaked because it's something that your body, you're either experiencing pain, tension, stiffness, or burnout, fatigue, things like that. And kind of like seeing, okay, what can I tweak? And then like, cause what I've been doing is like, I've been feeling like my business that I've had for like, since I graduated high school, college, I can't quite remember. I feel like I'm also going to be transitioning out of that, but I haven't quite narrowed down like what that looks like or what exactly I'm going to be doing. But I've been giving myself permission to create content on Instagram, to start opening up, like offering sessions and things like that. But to me, like I could say that like I basically now have like 2 jobs, but one feels like that's a little bit more established. It allows me to be able to like provide for myself while I start, you know, putting myself out there, allowing myself to be seen, allowing people to get a taste for who I am, for my work, for how I see things, how I can provide value, how I can be of service, start getting recognition, and then that will make way for the invitations to come. So when I think of like this, like it doesn't really feel like work. Or like even like coaching sessions, they don't feel like work. And they kind of like the words that I wrote down is like creating, guiding, management, master of systems, design, visionary, learning, knowledge, intuitive, seeing. So all of these words are like they do require energy. And I find like for me, it's always been more of a like a mental energy type of thing versus physical energy. But like the the way I process things, the way I see things, that requires a lot of energy. But it's not the way that we're used to seeing energy, right? We're used to seeing people like physically working. Um, but like thinking is a lot of it's a lot of work. It does, like for me, my brain consumes most of the calories I consume in a day. Um, I think that yeah, my brain, that's where like a lot of my energy can go if I'm not that careful. Um, but yeah, like as I was writing these ideas down for this video, I'm like, okay, for me, work has never really felt like work with like all the things that I've done. It's felt more like play. Like with my reselling business, it felt like I got paid to shop. I would shop, I would buy things, I would flip them, and I could do it all over again. Because to me, the fun part was finding pretty things to sell online and getting paid for it. Um, and now, adding this component to like creating YouTube videos and creating content, designing posts on Canva and things like that, it feels like play. It feels like play. One of the things that I think I always wanted to go into was graphic design, but because I knew that I wasn't like a natural at drawing, it was something that I had to kind of like work at. I decided to go the practical route and study business. It comes in handy because it helps for my other business. It helps me for this. Have a background in management, marketing, economics, real estate, management. Like I did a little bit, I got a taste for a little bit of everything when I was in college. So I use it now, but really kind of like the word for me that has come up like related to work is play. So if you're like, I do not, like that is not, I can't relate to that. Well, I would invite you to kind of like think, okay, if work did feel like play, what work, what would that look like? Like, what would I be doing? And that can start giving you ideas and, insights and hints and nudges as to what you could start doing to maybe like help you pivot into something that is more aligned for um, what is correct for you as a projector. And of course, you could always use your human design chart to help give you ideas of like how you're wired, what centers you've got to find, and kind of like help you remember. Because I've noticed it's more kind of like remembering what we like to do as children and seeing how can we get creative and find ways of monetizing that to where it literally feels like we're getting paid to play. Yeah. um, so it's my invitation for my fellow projectors that if you're kind of struggling with that belief that gets tossed around a lot in the human design world, that projectors are not here to work, I would invite you to add a few little words to the end of that and think projectors are not here to work like everybody else. Because like one of the persons that popped into mind as I was contemplating the content or what I wanted to talk about here is Gary Vee. Gary Vee is a projector, and I feel like that man's always on the go. Gary Vee is a projector, and for like Gary Vee, again, well, Gary Vee to me seems like he's always on the go, but like one of the things I think I have heard him say is that one of the reasons why he's able to do what he does is because he has a team. So I feel like sometimes when we're new to the system, it can feel like a little bit disempowering, and it's just about learning to see things a little bit differently. But yeah, that's kind of like pretty much what I wanted to talk about. That I don't agree that when like people say that projectors are not here to work. I love to work. I think I went through a period in my life where I kind of like really lost interest for everything, and after having like a pretty full or complete or life that felt very steady and stable, kind of experience like all that falling apart, and I didn't know what to do, and I kind of like went into this period of like depression, not wanting to interact with the world, very like still but not feeling alive, numbing myself out to pretty much everything. And now I'm starting to feel that joy for living and starting to feel like myself again, and also starting to want to interact with life and want to interact with people. And I'm finding that I have a lot more energy than I thought I did. And it's really like a huge part of the process has been doing the inner work of boundaries, healing codependent tendencies, tending to my nervous system, eating more nourishing foods, paying more attention to if I need rest, and not feeling bad for needing rest, not making that mean anything that isn't going to serve me. So it's definitely like a learning process. If you have people who like model this for you and can give you ideas or guide you, definitely makes it a lot easier. But you can totally figure this out on your own, and like don't think you have to do everything all at once. Like start making like tuning in and making small changes and compounding that, and you'll get a lot further than if you try to like rush through it and try to do everything at once. It's kind of like walking. You take one step at a time, and before you know it, you're at your destination. So that's what I wanted to share about my thoughts. When people say projectors aren't here to work, I find that when I'm doing stuff that I love, which is kind of like a generator characteristic, feeling like when you're doing at the sea, I think it's just a basic human thing. Like when we're doing things that we love, we're naturally going to be more motivated. We're naturally going to like wake up happier, ready to get out of bed. I started watching Elementary again, which is this Sherlock Holmes type of show. I've watched it a couple times just because I love kind of like seeing how Sherlock's mind works. And there's different, like people have done different versions of these, and I tend to like almost all of them. But this one in particular, it was the first episode where in this series, Sherlock has just been released from rehab, and his father hires a companion to make sure he's able to like kind of like readjust to life, and someone to keep an eye on him from relapsing. And in the series, Joan Watson, played by Lucy. Oh, I forgot her name. She was in Charlie's Angels. Lucy. Is it Lucy Liu? I don't remember her name. But anyway, she plays Joan Watson, and she used to be a doctor, and he kind of sees that she's got like 2 alarms. He's like, people who like what they do don't need 2 alarms to get out of bed in the morning. They're like excited to get up and get to work. So that's kind of like what I've really been feeling once I started to give myself permission to create content and not really knowing where this was going. It just felt like one day I'm like, I think I want to create videos for YouTube. I'm like, sounds crazy. Like, I don't know who's going to watch them. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about, but I just feel like I want to start creating videos on YouTube. So then I'm like, okay, what would be the first thing I want to talk about? And I actually started diving into my channels. I was learning about my channels, and I was also like creating content to kind of like explain to people what the characteristics of these channels are or how they work, and also inserting like my experience of having these channels and what that's been like. And then from there, I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. And it's actually like, for me, I find like doing this is becoming a little bit more exciting than my other job. But I put this out there just to start giving you ideas and to encourage you to start again tapping in and start listening to those little nudges you get, like, ooh, what if I did this, or what if I did that, and start playing with it. Like, go for it and see what happens and see how your energy shifts. And like before you know it, when you look back, you're like, oh, I didn't realize, or you're like, maybe I didn't realize it. Like I realize it now, but like I've been guided this entire time, and I kind of see like how things are starting to add up, you know. And it's a process of like one step at a time, one step at a time. Sometimes you'll get more than a few steps at a time, but start with one step at a time, and then just see what that does to your energy. And sometimes the step is to completely come to a stop, to allow the body and your system to reset. So it's going to be different for everyone. Tune in and see what answers you get from within. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any insights, comments, takeaways that you want to share, feel free to comment down below. Otherwise, you can find more information on ways to work with me on my website and also on Instagram. My handle is at Jeannie Salcedo. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. I think the majority of people, the way we, the way channel structuring, okay, the way that we're used to seeing work, it's not computing. Okay. Of course, you can use your chart to kind of like tap into certain clues and and you know how you using your chart to help you to you can always use your chart to help you kind of like think or I don't know why I can't get through this.